برحب بيكم في الافترنون سيشن بعد الغداء. وطبعا النهارده ندوه عظيمه ورائعه جدا بتنريتش الافريكان Egyptian relationships in all aspects. وإذا كنا we talked in the morning session about the governance and about the value of governance in the African development as a whole. We enjoyed a lot the session of our guests from all the African embassies in Egypt. And now I'd like to welcome my guests in this session, Mr. Adly Thoma, Dr. Khaled Derbala, Dr. Magid George, Mrs. Manal Abdel Moneim, Engineer Mohamed Atef. In fact, we are waiting for one of the members of the Arab Contractors Company, which has a huge investment in the African countries, Mr. Tamer Younes. I'd like to welcome all of you. This session, and definitely, we enjoyed the morning session. Mr. Yannick, the head of Ibrahim Index of African Governance, Ibrahim Foundation, and he is going to present to us about the case of Egypt. We are going to study the case of Egypt as one of the important pillars in the African-Egyptian relationships, and what is the future of this. Yes. The future of this relationship. We have a lot of hopes, a lot of ideas, a lot of ways of investment, and how we can enrich our relationships in the African continent with most of the African countries. So I'd like to invite Mr. Yannick now to present to us.
Thank you very much. This will be my last presentation of today. I think I've spoken enough today already. But so what I'm going to do is, as a final presentation, just present to you the case of Egypt for one of the categories of the Ibrahim Index for African Governance. And this is the one that measures sustainable economic opportunity. And this is just to give some context to the discussions that will take place afterwards. So as you know, as I mentioned in my first presentation, with sustainable economic opportunity in the Ibrahim Index, we're not measuring the level of the economy, but we're measuring about the environment that is created to a conducive environment for citizens to pursue economic goals. So I'm going to talk about Egypt's performance in 4 subcategories of the index: so public management, business environment, infrastructure, and the rural sector. So generally, Egypt performs very well in sustainable economic opportunity. It ranks 7th on the continent in terms of the category score. It also ranks in the top 10 for infrastructure and rural sector. It's improved in all the underlying subcategories of sustainable economic opportunity over the last 10 years. However, there's a slight decline that's seen in business environment, and I will talk you through some of the indicators that are driving this performance for Egypt. But as you can see here in the graphic, the green dot is Egypt and the rest of the distribution of African countries. So you can see that Egypt performs far above the African average score in all components of sustainable economic opportunity. As I said, Egypt performs pretty well in this category. It's in the top 10 in 2017, ranking 7th with an improvement of +9, which is quite a lot. It's also among the 10 most improved countries in sustainable economic opportunity. This is over the last 10 years. Over the last 5 years, Egypt is actually the most improved country of the 54 included in the data sets. So as I said, Egypt has seen the largest improvement on the continent since 2013. In comparison to North Africa, the regional average, it scores far above the North African average score. And actually the trend of improvement in Egypt has been increasing over the last 5 years. In my first presentation, I showed a graph which compared the GDP increase on the continent compared to the improvement in sustainable economic opportunity, Egypt shows a very similar trend. There has been improvement in sustainable economic opportunity, but the improvement in terms of GDP increase has been substantially larger. So there's a similar finding there between a bit of a disconnect between economic opportunity increasing and the percent in GDP increasing. This is also happening at a time when Egypt's working population has increased by about 12 million over the last 10 years. Its population has increased by about 20 million over the last 10 years. GDP growth has gone up. A couple of figures from the World Bank as well suggest that youth employment has gone up by a few percentage points as well. So this is all in contrast to the general trend in GDP increase. Nevertheless, as I mentioned, Egypt does pretty well in sustainable economic opportunity. This is largely driven by a really big improvement in infrastructure. So Egypt gained over 20 points in the last 10 years in infrastructure. As you can see on the table on the right there, Egypt is actually the most improved country in Africa in terms of improving its infrastructure in general. I'll talk a little bit more about the indicators that are driving that progress in a minute. The rural sector has also improved, as has public management. There's a slight decline in business environment, although this does mirror the African average trend. The majority of countries have seen some decline in this business environment subcategory over the last 10 years. So to delve a little bit deeper into how Egypt performs in these specific subcategories, as I mentioned, in infrastructure, it is the most improved country on the continent. This comes at a time when the North African average has remained relatively stagnant. So Egypt is doing quite well in infrastructure improvement compared to its neighbors. This is largely driven by indicators measuring provision of water and sanitation services, but also digital and IT infrastructure, so ICT provision, the number of people registered with mobiles, and the number of people with internet access at home, for example. So these are all large improving indicators for Egypt. At the last session, it was also discussed that the electricity supply seems to be an issue generally on the continent. This is also an area where Egypt performs pretty well in. In fact, the North African average for this particular indicator is quite high. In comparison to some of its neighbors, Egypt, again, is one of the most improving countries in infrastructure. Its score is still slightly behind that of Morocco. But as you can see from the line graph here, that since 2013, Egypt has really fast been catching up with Morocco, the top performer in North Africa in infrastructure. Tunisia is the third highest scoring country in the region. In terms of rural sector, again, Egypt scores far above the North African average and has been improving a lot more than the regional average as well. It improves a lot in indicators, for example, that measures access to agricultural research and extension services. So this measures whether governments are enabling farmers to access research and technology for improving productivity in the agricultural sector. There has been a slight decline in access to rural land and water for agriculture. So this is basically measuring whether farmers have access to land and water, as the indicator name suggests. Again, I'll make a few comparisons just with Morocco and Tunisia, as these are, in Africa, probably the most relevant comparisons to make. Again, Morocco is the highest scoring country in the rural sector, followed by Egypt and then Tunisia. Egypt and Morocco seem to be taking a similar trajectory to each other, whereas Tunisia has declined in the rural sector over the last 10 years. So despite all of Egypt's improvements in this area, it does also improve in public management. However, it's much less than in the infrastructure and rural sector subcategories. Again, it scores above the North African regional average score, and the pace of improvement in terms of public management in Egypt has also been increasing over the last 5 years. In the indicators that are measuring public management in the index, there's a bit of diversity between the trends that Egypt is undergoing. It's declined in a few measures measuring government statistical capacity, for example, although it is pretty high scoring still. It's improving in diversification of exports. If you remember, I showed a slide about how low this generally is in Africa, but Egypt performs very well. So the economy seems very diversified. One of the lowest scoring indicators for Egypt in the Sustainable Economic Opportunity category seems to be the tax and revenue mobilization one. This is one of Egypt's lowest scoring indicators and measures the amount of tax minus resource contributions that are obtained. Again, to compare it with some relevant neighbors, Morocco and Tunisia actually score a bit higher than Egypt in terms of public management. Neither Morocco nor Tunisia has been improving much over the last 10 years, but neither has Egypt. So this is just a bit of regional context, but this is one area where Egypt tends to score a little bit lower than some of its closer neighbors. I'm going to finish with business environments because this is the only subcategory which shows decline for Egypt within sustainable economic opportunity and is probably the most relevant for some discussions that will be held after this. There is a slight decline, but in the last 5 years, as you can see, there's been an annual average improvement of plus 2.90 from Egypt. This is actually one of the largest increases on the continent. So whilst there has been some decline in Egypt's business environment in the index over the decades, it seems to have recovered quite substantially since 2013. What's driving this is largely employment creation and satisfaction with employment creation. This is a perception indicator sourced from Afrobarometer, and it measures the extent to which citizens are happy with government's performance in creating employment. Some of the largest declining aspects at an African average level are the robustness of banks as well and the business regulatory environment. Now, Egypt bucks this trend. It's one of the few countries that is increasing its performance in the robustness of banks, which is basically measuring whether banks need recapitalization or whether they have sound balance sheets. There are a couple of large declines in business environment. These are from indicators that are provided by The Economist. One of them is absence of excessive bureaucracy and red tape, for example, that shows that there occasionally can be some bureaucratic delay in terms of getting some things done in business environments. So those are very quickly the high-level findings for Egypt in terms of business environment. Again, a very quick comparison with some of its neighbors, Morocco and Tunisia. Egypt lags behind both of these countries in terms of business environment, although it's relatively small. Morocco is one of the highest scoring countries in the index in terms of business environment. I think I will leave it there. Those are some high-level findings, but please feel free again to look at the data on the website ourselves and explore them in more detail. I hope that helps the conversation that will be had today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Yannick, about the data you have projected about Egypt. In fact, it is quite valuable and be of great benefit for the policymakers in Egypt. Now, in fact, we have 1 hour still remaining, and all these data should be translated into more and more investment, more and more trading between Egypt and the African countries, in fact. So if I'm going to invite my guests for each one to have his own story about the challenges he has faced, about the troubles, about the how he can overcome these challenges and these difficulties in business and investment in the African countries. So let us start with Mrs. Manal Abdel, because we have one lady, so we start with her. Ms. Manal Abdel is an executive chairperson, Sobek Solutions.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to share with you the experience I have personally in Africa. I work in a very different field I'm not in industry, I'm in the agriculture business and irrigation and agriculture. We provide solutions for projects and for government. And let me tell you in African, and I will relay this also to the index of governors, because this is what we're here for. I'm very much familiar with the 17 SGDs, of course, and the 7 MGDs. And it takes two to tango. When we want to reach this in all the African country, it has to be the 17 together. And the data is important, even for our business, as well as the finance for the data. But the focus of my work is irrigation and agriculture, and this requires electricity, it requires manpower, it requires regulations. Our main, as a group of companies, our main activity is in Uganda. I started in Uganda in 2006, simply because I wanted to see the source of the Nile. And Uganda is a very rich country, but believe it or not, with all the water we have in Africa, we do not have irrigation properly, and this is a big, big problem. There is a lot of rain, but there are no irrigation systems. This is very, very important. And in order to meet now these challenges of the SGDs and to get the finance for the SGDs, the private sector, this is where I'm talking about, as a private sector, we were very much engaged in, of course, you have to make profit to be sustained, otherwise you will lose the momentum and you will leave after a year or two if you just have here a program or so. What we have faced as problems is, of course, the legislation packages. Most of Africa, if you maybe know, 60% are rural, Arief. And the 60% have a lot of population there, but the population are leaving. I'll switch a bit in Arabic, maybe يكون أفضل. إن إحنا أساساً لما في أوغندا، أنا هتكلم على المثال اللي في أوغندا. الحقيقة المثال اللي في أوغندا إنه البلد غنية جداً، عندها موارد طبيعية رائعة، بالذات المية والتربة وكل الحاجة، وعندهم مان باور، يعني في أيدي عاملة عايزة تلاقي شغل. المشكلة الرئيسية إن مفيش حزمة تشريعية كانت سهلة. إحنا بتكلم على من 2006 بدأوا تدريجياً وبمساعدات كثيرة إن يبقى في حزمة تشريعية، في قوانين، لكن المشكلة الأساسية اللي بتواجه هو الالتزام بالقوانين. الالتزام بالقوانين، وإنه الزراعة تحديداً، ودي حاجة فيها تحدي ضخم.
In the agricultural sector, patience is a virtue, especially in the agriculture sector. People need to work hard with the soil, but the youth in Africa wants to go online, wants to work in the city, and agriculture is not so attractive nowadays to the youth in Africa. And people might go hungry if agriculture deteriorates. Also, the land or the commands are fragmented. What we have is 2 acres or 3 acres. We don't have large plots of land except in the Cameroon or in the Sudan. So fragmentation of land ownership is also a channel. So we started with a model. So as a private sector company, we got a large plot of land with clusters. So we said, for example, we would cultivate pineapples. We would give other people pineapples, or we might give them finance to get the seeds or the equipment they need, because they know that we can buy this and then process it if we want. What we need is market. I attend all the summits. Everyone is trying to sell to Africa. They try to sell products, goods to Africa. Few people go there for development. African rural workers know that what they sell for 20 cents might be sold for $20. So if it's not fair, then we will stop cultivating. Of course, governance is key. but we need to have laws, and more importantly, we need to have laws that are complied with or enforceable, because sometimes the laws are there, but the laws are not enforced. So this is mere ink on paper. Most of African countries are investment attractive countries, but they need to build on the momentum, and this includes people feeling the urgency of social responsibility. People need to invest in education, agriculture, investment, in order to score well in Mo Ibrahim Index or in the African Union Index. So based on my own experience, we faced challenges, but we shouldn't just, or we couldn't even give a presentation to African rural workers. No, what we need to do is to roll up our sleeves with them, to work on the ground, to show them that fair trade sustainability is real, that you can win and we can win together, that we are there to address this challenge now and for the coming years. We want to have a base for investment to chip in, because whenever investors come to African countries, they would ask for incentives, or they would ask for exemptions, or they would tell, no, we want to bring our teams together. No, we shouldn't approve that. Africa is rich, especially when it comes to human resources. So as the private sector, I'm not speaking now as an Egyptian citizen, I'm speaking as a private sector representative. We need to create markets, we need to enable people to be empowered the African way. We shouldn't say that dimensions are 2 centimeters times 5 centimeters. No, this shouldn't be the case. Private sectors should develop the countries they work in order for the state to be well, because transparency is a bit problematic, because people will say, why are we going to pay taxes when you don't provide us with enough services? So countries shouldn't wait for aid. As long as African countries enjoy investment, then we should be working. And now I am addressing my talk to the African diaspora all over the world. Many African people live in Europe or in America or in the US. Remember, India did so and called for Indian businessmen abroad to come back home to finance development projects, to provide job opportunities. We worked hand in hand with the government of any country, because we need to work on the projects that the government wants to have. We want people to have money. So instead of paying taxes, we will do something different. For example, in many think tanks, we can say that instead of getting taxes from investors, we can work to develop the countries through bonds, for example. So Mobrahim Index is very important. Like, you can have a benchmark against which we can measure the performance, but again, we need to take into consideration laws and legislations in place. And we are trying to work on the 17 SDGs like all at once. Let me tell you that when it comes to education and health, for example, girls drop out of education. This has to do with health, for example. This has to do with culture and norms. And we need to empower people to get rid of these old misconceptions. And again, agriculture can serve as a key for the change aspired. We are very happy to hear about your experience. We expected to hear about the challenges and how to solve these challenges. I think your experience is a successful one, and you got the double the time given to anyone because you're the only lady. Now, Mr. Adly Thoma, CEO, Gemini Enterprise Africa, in 6 minutes, please. Thank you so much for your opportunity and your invitation in Gemini Enterprises Africa. We are an investment company. We are working in Egypt and Africa as part of Orascom. The chair of Gemini Africa is Engineer Naguib Sewedy, and I am the CEO of Gemini Enterprises Africa. In fact, we have an ambitious objective when it comes to investment in Africa, but we focus on a different sector, that is to say direct cooperation and providing support to entrepreneurs. In fact, Africa has much potential. Many entrepreneurs are in Africa. This field is fertile, it's promising, and the potential there is still unlocked and untapped. People have not invested enough in entrepreneurship in Africa. But when we say so, we need to be realistic and we need to have a clear goal. We stand on 2 feet: investment and social impact or social responsibility in African countries. So it's very important for us to design a model that is based on community development and changing the mindset, especially of youth and women. Our values are empowerment of youth and women through job opportunities creation, and we cannot do so without financial sustainability. Yes, sustainability is a buzzword, but we have a very clear model of financial sustainability. We need to create this sustainability in the society through engaging youth and women. We want people to have like a business mindset or a business mentality, and this is a main challenge. How to change the mindset of youth and women? Let me give you some figures, and then I will present some challenges. In Nigeria, 41% of women are entrepreneurs. 41% of women are entrepreneurs. This is not the case even in developed countries. Entrepreneurs will lead through the fourth generation revolution. Really will lead the international economies, including the Egyptian and African economies. Many opportunities are there for digitalization, for example, through innovation and creativity. But without taking the initiative and venturing into African markets I won't say to help them, but rather to forge a partnership with them. I was once visiting one of the poor countries in Africa, and we decided that when we would go to the capital, we would take a plane or a flight to visit the remote rural areas. We held a meeting with the community there, and I cannot forget one sentence. A lady told me that it's the first time ever to be listened to. It's the first time for our voice to be heard. It's the first time to be asked about our needs and our abilities. People will always invite us to go somewhere just to give us some money, and that's it. We're not after getting money, but we want to develop our community and to be financially independent. We need to educate people. Education is the cornerstone of any change in Africa. Because we want the new generation to understand the concepts of establishing a business or a startup. Maybe we can have a rural model to be scaled up across Africa. So maybe we can mainstream the idea that entrepreneurs or young people and women can be successful, and they can positively influence their own families, their own communities. They can create job opportunities for other people, so on and so forth. But some people might have the perception that I'll get money, I'll spend that money, and after spending this money, I'll be done with my part. No, this is not the case. We need to provide capacity building trainings for these people. We want people to understand profitability, business model, revenue generation, in order for them to own the project. We want them to have a sense of belonging and a sense of ownership. It's their own project. We can help them through a full partnership model, as if like we are both one company and we establish a legal entity for both of us. This partnership enables these people to get all kinds of support, whether moral support, financial support, training support, in order for us to be able to prepare young cadres or young generations to lead the change in Africa. Here I'm referring to economic development with the help of the internet or the fourth revolution or fourth generation revolution. So I invite everyone to invest in creativity and innovation, to invest in development in Africa. Much potential is there. It's untapped and we have a lot to work on. I'm aware of time constraints, so concluding remark. When we say we are working in Africa, we cannot say we are going to work in Africa. Africa is not one place. Africa has to be divided. Yes, we have 5 areas: North Africa, South Africa, East Africa, West Africa, Central Africa. And each regional community has its own characteristics, and you need to do your own homework before going to that. So West Africa countries are francophone, for example. You need to take that into consideration. South countries in the south have their own style or their own ecosystem. It's a hub in itself. These 5 regional communities are not to be generalized. So, for example, Nile Basin countries are another set, and Egypt enjoys intra-African trade with Nile Basin countries. Also the African Horn. So you need to study the characteristics, the geography, the topography, the demography of each regional community in order to create or establish startups from the heart of the community. These startups should influence positively the community. We shouldn't be parachuting the people and giving them instructions about what to do and how to do. Thank you so much.
جميلة جدا، بس برضه احنا كنا عايزين نسمع مشاكل. عندك مشكلة؟ يعني هدعو دلوقتي صديقنا العزيز دكتور ماجد جورج، Chairman of the Board of Directors of Mamiba Egypt for Cosmetics. حقيقة الدكتور ماجد عنده خبرة طويلة في التعاون الإفريقي في مجال الكوزموتكس، وهو عامل سورت اوف ماركت ريسيرش كده على الافريكان ماركت ان جنرال. نحب ان احنا نسمعه منه. اتفضل يا دكتور ماجد.
ده معناه ان احنا التارجت بتاعنا مش بس افريقيا، تارجت معانا ان احنا نعلي مستوى الجمال في افريقيا. ده الكوزماتكس بتاعتنا. نبرزه. استاذن حضرتك، انا هكلم على 2 ليفل الشركه الشخصيه بتاعتي اللي اسمها ماميبا، والليفل الثاني اللي هو المجلس التصديري. انا بتشرف ان انا رئيس المجلس التصديري للصناعات الطبيه اللي هي صناعه الادويه والمستحضرات التجميل والمستلزمات الطبيه. لما اتكلم على افريقيا بالنسبه على المستوى الشخصي بتاعي، انا اصلا من عيله بتشتغل في مجال الكوزماتكس من سنه 66. ان انا في 2006 عملت الشركه بتاعتي، التخصص بتاعها اللي هو البرودوي داكاي بتاعت الاوتيلات، اللي هي الشامبوهات والصوابين اللي في الاوتيلات. يعني لما تطلعوا في الاوض اللي هنا هتلاقوا الحاجات بتاعتي موجوده. اعمل شويه دعايه بقى دلوقتي. اول تصدير عملته، لو نتكلم على مشاكل، خلوا بالكم افريقيا بالنسبه لها لما تيجي تقول في افريقيا انا من مصر، اول حاجه هيتقال لك ناصر.
Egypt, the first time that the first thing that you will hear is Nasser, and you will find a kind of appreciation for President Gamal Abdel Nasser. Who remember us, who still remember the support of President Nasser. So the first, when I first start exporting to Africa, you know, Africa, some of the countries, they still recognize the support by President Gamal Abdel Nasser till the 50s and the end of the 50s and the 60s. Actually, recently in the economic conference that was conducted in Sharm el-Sheikh, I was sitting there with some African ministers. Actually, the minister over there was talking about Egypt for like 10 minutes, praising and appreciating the Egypt. Then after this, the two ministers came. The first time they came to me and they said, with all my due respect, I would like to know what's Egypt going to provide us. So if we are going to work on the personal affairs or the personal relations or on the history of the appreciation for Egypt, we have like 4 or 5 years to work on this. Otherwise, we are going to be equal to any other country from all over the world. This is generally speaking about Africa. Africa looks at Egypt at the beginning of the relations that we are far away from Africa. So once we have, once they have a problem, they compare Egypt by the European countries. But because I am an African country, so as if I am a second-class country. I remember when I started exporting to one of the African countries, and they got the products, and they sent an email right away. The containers were flooded and all the products were ruined, and that was the first time for me to export to Africa. 48 hours I was at their hotel. It is a multinational hotel. Once I entered the hotel, the manager of the hotel told me, okay, I'm very happy that you're here and we prepared a suite for you. I told him, no, I'm not coming to stay in the suite. I'm coming to have a look at the products. When I looked at the products, I found that the loss was less than 0.3%. So this is for the quick reflection. Another country, I had a kind of contracts with some of the hotels, and at the beginning of the year, the Minister of Trade, he said that they are not going to import this kind of products. I went there and I talked to the Minister of Trade, and then he said, no, tourism is an exception. We are going to import your products. You know, I just like sell this kind of products, the amenities of the hotel, the shampoo, the shower gel, the air condition, the small bottles that they are in the toilet. So it was a problem. So what I did is I went to my factory. I took a semi-automatic machine. I put it in a container. I took it as a hand luggage on a business class, and I went on the plane. The worst that could happen, that they are going to stop me in the customs and I'm going to pay money. But thank God, everything was okay. I paused with the machine and I start producing. Those people who I promised them that I'm going to export the products to them. Within 3 months, I phoned them and I told them I'm going to give you the products 1 month early than the time we agreed upon. If you would like to work in Africa, for sure, you're going to face obstacles and you're going to face challenges. The businessman who's telling you no obstacles and no challenges, this means that he is not successful. I found that the most important challenges and the obstacles that I faced are the logistics. So I start opening branches branches in Africa. So by this way, I was overcoming the logistics. In the COMESA, we are protected. There is no customs. But outside the COMESA, in the ECOWAS and the SADC, we are not protected. Who is going to be our competitors? They are going to the Chinese are going to be the competitors. So for me to go to the hotel and I would tell him, I'm giving you an advantage better than the Chinese, so I should have a branch, I should have a factory that is producing in the country in order to lower the price cost. So for the logistics, first of all, is to do logistic centers in Africa, and I start thinking about this in the year 2008. Dr. Abla is smiling now because whenever they were talking about logistic centers in the center, she will tell him, go to Dr. Mohamed. So let's talk with you quickly concerning the medical sector in Africa. In my council, I have 150 medical factory, 120 cosmetic factories. Average, I have 500 factories that they work in the council, and we are responsible for improving their exports. Let's talk together about Africa. What is the market? The African market is about 15 billion US dollars from 214 till 2018 to 15.5 billion US dollars. Before talking about us as Egypt, let's talk about inter-African importation, meaning the African countries importing medical components and medicine that they are manufactured and produced in the African countries. Less than 5%. You want to know the amount of the Egyptian products, medical products, to the African countries, 65 million US dollars. This is our problem. Our problem now is as Africans and as trade between us. Unfortunately, it's in a very bad condition. For this reason, maybe when we talk, even if we looked at the international companies or international factories or international or big companies that they do export medicine to Africa, we will see that Africa is the richest continent all over the world. When we evaluate Africa, if in the morning you're going for shopping and you come back in the afternoon, you see a lady holding a Chanel or an Yves Saint Laurent bag in her hand, you will say, oh, this is a very rich lady. But if you looked at the big 10 countries that Africa is importing medicine from them, whom they are, 7 European countries, USA, here we have 8, in addition to India and China. So can you imagine when I say France, Switzerland, Holland, Belgium, and Great Britain and Italy, these are the main suppliers of Africa. So not only we import from European countries, but we import from the expensive countries. And this is a kind of contradiction. There is something that doesn't go right here. For this reason, in the council, we decided, number one, our target is Africa. In spite of all the projects, the fairs, the exhibitions, the annual scale up will never exceed 10 or 15%. So we had to think out of the box. In the council, we established a company. We have about 26 companies and we are scaling up. And we started by this company to go to the ministries of health in the African countries. What we say, what we talk, we say, today I have a company that represents about 155 medical factories. Give me the tender, give me your price list, and I'm going to do a kind of an internal tender among the 156 factories. I am an exporting council. I'm not a profitable council. So can you imagine an African country that is importing with 100 or 200 million dollars, and you say that you're going to give them a discount or reduce the price to 10 and 15%? This is not bad. In addition to this, I will tell you about the logistics for this companies to open open an LC, so they open one LC, letter of credit, and then we start coordinating with foreign funds and foreign financial support. I give him 1 year as financial facilities. By this way, I will convince him that I'm really there to benefit him, and I will tell him, I'm here in your country for 2 or 3 years. If I reached a market share higher than 20 or 30%, I'm going to establish a branch of our factory in your country. If you do a kind of alliance with any of the medicine factory all over the world, and this company will take a decision tomorrow that they are going to close down the branch of the factory in your country, you're going to lose. But with me, you're going to do an alliance with 155 companies. If, for example, the worst scenario, 30 companies are going to say or are going to decide that they are not going to work with you again, you still have 120 companies and 120 factories still working with you. Then we put a condition. You know what is the biggest obstacle in Africa? Is the registration. The registration. You have to register the medicine itself, so I do a kind of agreement. All these advantages as a package. But we have to do something together, which is the mutual recognition. And I said, and in addition to all the advantages and liabilities that apply on my team, will apply on your team. And I set one condition, that the manufacturer will be in his country. First of all, I will conduct a study for the market to see that there will not be any competitors for my factory. So they need support. They need support, and we need to study the market. And the first MOU was signed with Zambia. Nowadays, we are scaling up with 3 other African countries, and according to this, we are going to start to open our markets over there. The last point. Who works in the foreign trade, you will see concerning the international exhibitions. By the end of the exhibition, there is a kind of a report from the embassy or from the exporters, and they say, for example, we signed contracts for like $20 or $30 million. And then after 1 year, you will see that the total work was 0. Why? Because Africa today, in Africa, we have lots of obstacles. First of all, the facilitations by the banks. So anyone in Africa to open an LC, letter of credit, he is obliged to put 100 to 200% of the value of the contract. So if there is any kind of fluctuation, they cover themselves. This is the first obstacle. The second obstacle is the logistics. We in Africa, we play billiardo. So we have to go to Notre Dame first and then to Africa. So as if we are playing billiardo. So according to this, the logistics is very important in order to deliver products from here to Africa, minimum from 21 to 60 days. Somalia, it takes 54 days because the boat has to cross to go to Dubai, and then from Dubai to Somalia. So we have the problems of the banks, then the cargo, and according to this, the pyramid of the state, the top of the pyramid, the agencies that they have the financial abilities to put 120% and wait for 120 days until he get the products, they are very few. So when we attend our exhibitions, we got the wholesale sector. But when he start to implement, he will discover I have to put 120% of the LC, and I have to wait for 120 days. So and for this reason, we start working on the project under the name of the Logistic Centers. What's the idea of the Logistic Centers? Is to put products in Africa in the storage, in the warehouses. For example, we rent a hall like this one in an administrative building, and then I have a representative that is responsible for talking to the wholesale sector. So if one of them would like to try even one package of your product, he will go to the store and he will buy this package and he will try. Today it's one package, tomorrow it's going to be 2, 3, 4, 30 and 100. To penetrate the African market, we have to think about products that they are manufactured in Africa. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Dr. Abla, for giving me such an opportunity. Actually, we'd like to thank Dr. Megid George on his very interesting presentation, because the field of medicine, I really focus on the field of medicine, and actually it represents a real challenge in the African market, generally speaking. And you actually present some of the real solutions concerning working with the banks and the cargo logistics, and all these solutions have to be submitted to the policymakers and to the decision makers in the state. If we said. If we put the index of Mohamed Foundation, health and medicine and human rights, the medicine, it represents about 60% of the health problem, in addition to the epidemics and to the other problems. So I hope that we can create a promise of a market for the Egyptian medicine, because Egyptian medicine has a very good reputation, and as you said, that the Indian or the Chinese market penetrate the African market, but I can assure you that we still have the chance to gain the reputation of the Egyptian medicine. Maybe the problem that most of the African countries, they got their own medical demands through funds. You know, all the problems that they face, like malaria, HIV, they got their support and their fund from international funds. But actually, the African countries is a promising market for us. Please allow me to introduce Mr. Tamer Younes, Procter & Gamble Executive Board Member and Head of Corporate Affairs, North Africa and Levant. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Dr. Adel. I represent Procter & Gamble. Who here in the room doesn't know who is Procter & Gamble? We are a company that we manufacture and market about 65 products in 10 sectors, like herbal essences, aerial, Pantene, Pampers, always. And because of the nature of these products, that they are consuming products, the company is improving the way of living by these products. More than we are about 7 billion users that they use our products. So sometimes it's very difficult for us to use the maritime cargo to transfer our products, the big products like Pampers and like Always. So in Africa, we established the first factory in Morocco, 1955, and then we started scaling up in Africa. We have 2 factories in Egypt, 1 factory in South Africa. The company, because we are exporting. For example, the factory here in the 2 factories here in Egypt, they export 40% for always ferry, Persil and Ariel. We export these products to the African neighborhood countries. So the majority of the problems that we face in Africa, number one, the regulations. Each African country, they set their own regulations and their own standards. And as we said about the mutual recognition, in order to export a product from one country to another, you need that this product that is produced here in Egypt, it's co-op with the standards and the regulation of the country that you are going to export this product to. So we have a kind of joint agreements. We benefit from the GAFTA, we benefit from the COMESA. We are negotiating now the establishment of the African Free Trade Area. We are talking about 650 million people. All of them, they are going to be under the supervision of this agreement. Most of the banks over there are going to work on facilitating the trade between these countries, as well as knowing the regulation of the countries. As Mrs. Manal said, the women access our countries. I'm talking about on behalf of P&G in the African market. Actually, we focus on, or we keen on, in good citizenship practices, meaning that we have good citizenship ethics. Me as a citizen, I have a right to access the market, and I have duties is to improve the society I'm living in. If we look at Africa, you will see that the problem of education, the problem of the health services, especially with the women. So as a company, how can we help if we find when the women in a certain age, they don't go to space, they don't go to school because of the lack of awareness, and because of the culture, the mothers, they don't talk to the children, to the daughters, and there is no health services. So what we do in Nigeria, in Egypt, that we do a kind of cooperation with the schools, with the Ministry of Health, with the Ministry of Education, is to explain hygiene to the girls at schools in order not to be worried, and in order to and it's also a kind of sustainability for our product. So here practically we show the girls how to use our products. So this is a kind of our social, this is part of our social responsibilities, and at the same time we benefit by making the society and the community know about our products. There is another thing that we do, which is the economic empowerment in the markets that we work in, like in Egypt, for example, we can see the working women. They actually, in some of the cases, they are the main pillar for their families, and for this reason, we start working with the NGOs, with the international organizations, like UN Women, for example. We do a kind of joint, a kind of partnership, how we reach the women in the poor areas, like in Minya and Bani Suef in Upper Egypt, and they start looking for women that they do have good, that they are good potential and they are ready to work. We give them the products in a low price, and then they start selling this products without paying the price of the product at the beginning, and then by managing the capital, they start establishing their own business. We gather about like 50 ladies, and they established their own company, and I was very happy to pay them a visit in Bani Suef last month. They were talking in this way: I am the financial manager, I am the HR, I am the manager, I am the marketing manager. I was very happy to see them speaking this language, and this actually we help them to improve their social standard of living. I don't want to be lengthy. I'm going to give the chance to my colleagues. Thank you very much, Mr. Tamer, for your presentation. Now we are going to invite Engineer Mohamed Atef, Sewedy Electric. Miss Engineer Mohamed Atef, Africa Chief Commercial Officer, Sewedy Electric. Please, the floor is yours. Good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I would like to introduce Sewedy Electric. Sewedy Electric Group, it is an Egyptian African group, was established more than 80 years now. This group is divided into five main activities. The first one is industry. We manufacture all the electric products, either cables, transformers, accessories. In addition to another activity, which is the contracting. We work actually in the contracting sector, transmission, distributing lines, in addition to different contracting. Another sector which is investments. Also, we invest in some of the energy sectors, like selling energy to the governments, like the Egyptian governments. We have here big projects, or to the European or African governments. The fourth sector is development. We are developers for industrial zones. We have more than 25 million square meters among industrial zone 9 in Egypt and other industrial zones in Africa, industrial developers in Africa. And the last sector is the renewable energy. Actually, we are registered in the Egyptian stock. We have 15,000 employees. Our investments about $15 million. All our financial information, you can find it on the website, because we are registered from more than 20 years. We have a partnership with the African countries. We are talking about long terms partnership. We established and we built factories, and this is we have factories in 8 African countries, and in the meantime we are studying scaling up to open more factories in African countries, in addition to the projects either in the field of information technology and communication, smart cities, in renewable energy, etc. From among the obstacles, I don't want to be lengthy, and I'm not going to repeat what was said by my colleagues. As to divide Africa into clusters, we deal with the same aspect. We don't have just a specific strategy for Africa. No, we divide Africa into clusters: North Africa, West Africa, South Africa, and Central Africa. Each sector or each cluster has its own characteristics. The other point that was referred by Dr. Mohamed, which is to ensure to ensure exporting. Actually, we export to more than 120 countries all over the world electric products. For sure, we face obstacles and challenges. We should meet the specs and the global and the international standards for our electric cables and electric products. We are trying to overcome the obstacles from among the which is finance and the funding. Financing is very important, or funding is very important in the field of the projects. We are asked from the ministers of energy and from the prime ministers to conduct projects, but actually they don't have the financial ability to fund the project. So we are proposing, we are recommending, and actually we talked about this many times in the cabinet. We are suggesting to have an Egyptian fund to fund or to finance the Egyptian projects in Africa, and I hope that this will be one of the achievements of for Egypt, being the chair or the president of the African Union, to have to establish an Egyptian fund to finance the Egyptian projects in Africa. So we need a financial entity to fund the projects. Like China, for example, they fund the projects and they fund the companies. Even India, they fund their projects and they fund their companies. I think from among the files that are going to be discussed among the decision makers and the policy makers in Egypt is discussing the establishment of an Egyptian fund to finance the Egyptian projects in Africa. Also, in addition to, I would like to assure the role of the social responsibility that we take it on our responsibility, that we have to respect the development and the improvement that occurred in Africa, and to respect the qualified resource and to improve this qualified resource and to deal with it with all the due respect and with all the due appreciation. We actually, part of our social responsibility is Africa. In addition of establishing factories and companies, we establish hospitals. Also, we are conducting an academy for vocational and technical education in Africa. Thank you very much. I don't want to be lengthy, and it was my pleasure being with you. Thank you very much, Engineer Mohamed. I know that Sewedy, you invest in like 8 African countries. In the meantime, we have factories in 8 African countries. What is the most African countries that it was easy for you to work in it? And on the other side, what was the most difficult countries in the terms of obstacles and challenges? You will be surprised, from among the most successful experience is Sudan. From among our successful experience is our partnership in Sudan. Our partnership, it goes back now for 20 years. So Sudan was very, very good. In addition to, we don't focus on transferring the revenues, but the main reason is the sustainability, how to transfer the revenue into new investment in the same country or in the neighboring country or in other sectors, in addition to the main investment in the main sector, which is the sector of energy. Very good that they are talking about transferring your revenue into new investments, but you need to be profitable. So I'm telling you that we are a profitable company, thank God, and touch wood. We exist in the Egyptian stock, and actually I know that the main reason for any company is to be a profitable organization, not a non-profitable organization. But here I'm talking about the quick investments and the rapid investments and the long-term investment, and this is a big difference between a company that has a financial ability for existence for a long time and another company that they have weaker financial ability, that they only conduct a short-term projects. The main aim is just to implement the project as a kind of trade, and that's it. The most competitors you found in the African market in your field, in the products, not in the cables, in our products, the Indian products and the Chinese ones. And unfortunately, but actually we wish and we hope that you unify the specs. I'm very proud that some of the African countries, they have a system, a contracting system, a transparent contracting system, very clear. And now some of the African countries, they exceed the doing business and they are ranked in. So I'm proud as an African that, as an African citizen, that the African countries are improving. So as we have more unified specs and more we have transparency, this will assure the rights of the African citizenship and the transparent and the fair competition. I would like to thank you very much. Again, we would like to listen to the obstacles or to the problems. The last or the final speaker, Mr. Khaled Derbala. digitalization advisor. You're going to talk about the field of IT and information technology and communication. Good afternoon. I have a different industry. I am an ICT, information communication technology. Actually, I have a short experience. It dates back to 8 years ago, and it gathered all the problems, starting from Mr. Adly to the last speakers. All the problems I passed or I faced these problems. My experience started in the year 2011. I am the CEO of Acne. It's an old company in Egypt. We focus on ICT. We decided in 2011 to explore the African market. Actually, we wanted to build a new business model. I'm not going there to sell. I'm going there to make him to have a win-win situation, a win-win game. And at the same time, I'm not going there in order to ask him to give me money. So how can I achieve this equation? By doing a kind of software in a revenue share business. The software simply was the e-visas. Those who travel to Dubai and got the visa for Dubai, it's an e-visa, It's exactly the same like this one, and the applications that is related to this domain, because this is e-visa. It's a benefit for him because it's an e-visa, and at the same time, he can collect the fees of this visa, and at the same time, this transaction will happen online. So I take my money online. It is not some over on the visa. So this kind of business model, when it's in front of the decision maker, he will find that it's a zero cost. There will be a kind of developing in this aspect, and his situation in front of the whole world as if he's improving, and at the same time, as we said, it's a zero cost, and he collected the money of the business in one aspect, and I took my money, an extra cost on each transaction, and it is not paid by him, it's paid by the applicant. Sorry. I had a very successful experience in Cameroon, and I'm operating in more than 22 countries. I don't do a physical operation, but there is a kind of penetration, like Zimbabwe, for example, Zambia. And we have implementation in Zambia and in Cameroon. Dr. Mohamed if he was here, he might have told you the problems that we face in the model. If it is in front of anyone, he will say, wow, this is a very nice model, but suspicious. The African people, they are very afraid of any foreign application. That they fear that you are here to cheat me, you are here to penetrate my database, you are here to deceive me, especially in some of the countries. There is one of the countries, without mentioning the name, I talked to the Director General for Migration, and simply he told me, you're going to upload this, and I'm going to upload this application, and then you're going to deceive us and take our money and fly back to your home country. So I said, what do you need? He said, I need the source code of this application. I said, okay, I don't mind, I'll give it to you, because I'm not deceiving you. But he's still suspicious, he's still doubting. Unfortunately, we did not continue our work, because he continued on putting obstacles, because he had a previous very bad experience with a Belgian company. So this is the worst obstacle that we face in the African countries. We are talking about data, we are talking about information technology. This is the worst obstacle, that he has this kind of fear, this kind of doubting, that he's afraid I'm coming to penetrate his database. The nature of the ICT, this kind of industry, it's a trip between states. If you focused the American product, or the Indian product, or the French product, you will find that these products in the ICT industry, they are supported and enhanced by their countries, by their states. And this is actually requested for us here in Egypt. We should get the support of the state. Why? Because as if we are working with ourselves. We don't get any support from the state. When you look at the decision makers, I'll be there in the African country and I will see an Indian company accompanied with the Indian ambassador with him. So the Indian government is supporting the company, but there I'm standing all alone by myself. These are the biggest problems that we face our application in Africa. For us, we've been in Africa since 2011 up to now. We hope that we continue on fighting and trying to overcome the obstacles. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Khaled. We would like to open the floor up for questions. Yes, proceed. Good afternoon. My name is Abdel. We export gypsum for Africa, and we want to establish a factory in Egypt to export calcium carbonates. Dr. Mohamed said everything, and he explained the problems we face. The most pressing challenge is the lack of shipping line in Africa. This affects our investment much. Along with the financial appropriations, we lose our money, we export, and then the banks there tell us that we don't have any guarantees for you. How can we solve that, or how can we solve the problem, or how can I help our businessmen to export to Africa, since like some exhibitions are held but they're not effective? I would like to thank Dr. Abla and honorable ministers and ambassadors for convening this important event. I'm not asking the panelists here. I'm just asking or thinking out loud. Now we are studying the experience of Egypt, yeah? The health and education sectors are the most important sectors in Egypt. The president launched an initiative about treating HCV in Africa. And I really wanted to hear the experience or the achievements of Egypt in Africa. When it comes to education, Egypt has branches. For example, we had a university affiliated to universities in Egypt, in Chad, and in the Sudan. We want to impact people, and we cannot do so through business only. We want to have real positive influence, like Dr. Mohamed said. You know, Nasser is like still a word that carries meaning to African people. Why don't we create other universities in countries? As for livestock, you know, especially in the Sudan, we have large areas and we have rich livestock. We need to start some projects in this sector. A journalist from El Borsa newspaper. investors or exporters need to know more about bilateral or international agreements with African countries. Most of exporters or like investors are not well aware of the agreements Egypt signed, whether with East African countries or West African countries. The situation of Africa is similar to ours. They don't want to come and invest, but they want us to go and invest. So we want to hear your comment on these 2 points. Of course, there are international agreements, especially when it comes to intra-African trade or investment. And these agreements or conventions are implemented by either public or private sectors. So, for example, we had an African unit affiliated to the cabinet. This unit was responsible for all the frameworks, the agreements, the memorandum of understandings with Africa in order to issue guidelines for investors. Yes, but we need investors to be aware of that. This is a real problem. Some people don't even know about it. The fact that Egypt is the gate of Africa. I think Kenya is the new gate. Now, yeah, you might have more than one gate to the same building. That's okay. Egypt can be one of the gates. That's okay. Yes, of course, the African depth or the African extension was really well established a while ago, and we try to regain that because we want to regain the role we used to play. So if you have more than one gate, but being one gate is still good.
مساء الخير دكتور إبراهيم درويش.
Dr. Darwish, professor at the Monefaya University Agriculture School. So yes, I'm really keen. And I want to get your help. First, businesses from Egypt to Africa, or let me tell you, opening new horizons. The Egyptian state is trying to help other African countries, for example, in the health sector. In the first session, someone referred to the problem of access to energy and accessibility. And someone said that the Renaissance Dam might help in generating electricity. Now, I care for partnership and for comparative advantage. So it's a give and take situation. It's integration. It's inclusiveness. So the lady here said about her model. We can scale up this model or mainstream that. We have farms in the Sudan. We need to do so in all other African countries to benefit all of us. I think it's the closing remarks. So, Dr. Abdel, do you have a question or you want to provide some closing remarks? Okay, allow me first to thank our dear panelists, Mr. Adly, Mrs. Manal, Dr. Mohamed, Dr. Tamer, Engineer Mohamed, Dr. Khaled. And we have many other experts or investors working in Africa, and God willing, we will be able to host many other experts to study the points of strengths and points of weaknesses. Thank you so much, Dr. Abla, for giving me the floor. I'm sorry, she's not using a microphone, so I cannot get to hear without a microphone. Sorry for that. Briefly, just very briefly. Before concluding the session, I want you to see these figures. We know that the intra-African trade is poor, but Africa is divided into Eastern, Western, Southern, and Central regions in Africa. So this is the division of the different racks of Africa. And we studied the situation of each region and the developments since 2008. It's clear that the trade of Egypt, or the inputs of Egypt, the exports of Egypt are channeled towards North Africa and South Africa. Here you have the percentages, and you have the classification. So we focus only on North Africa, whether when it comes to exports or even imports. Here, net trade and deficit. The same holds true. So transactions with Eastern Africa, there was a high deficit, and then things improve a bit. There is a technical glitch. The slides keep changing, but the main message is that Egypt focuses only on North Africa and ignores the rest of Africa. And this shouldn't be the case. Intra-African trade shouldn't be that limited. Having said so, first of all, I want to thank Mo Foundation, represented by Dr. Mohamed, Ibrahim, and of course represented by Mr. Yannick and Mr. Yannick. Thank you so much. We cannot thank you enough. This index is very important. I cannot stress that enough. It's not just an index giving you a ranking. No, it's a framework. It's a platform for dialogue exchange, for exchanging data sets. This is very crucial. Dr. Farouk El-Baz said that we forgot who our neighbors are. We forgot that we are part of Africa. We forgot that Africa is the future. Yet we repeated many things, but it's worth repetition. So data availability is an issue. We need to have one united Africa as a strong continent. And again, Africa is not one country. We need to remember that. The last slide that kept changing shows that Africa is not one big country. No, Africa is diversified. We did not discuss the new continental free trade area. We did not discuss that, especially given the different development rates, electricity, health, education, the youth in Africa. The varying levels of development inside the continent, the urgent need for us to have a plan of actions. In the MENA region, we know the why, sometimes we know the what, but we don't know the how. This is the key, this is the cornerstone, this is the problematic aspect. From different sectors, discussions were interesting. We have real investment opportunities in IT. 70% of Africa lacks internet connection. This is an area to be improved. The same holds true for agriculture, for irrigation, for entrepreneurship. Of course, the initiatives that can be done by the private sector. Many details were explained by Dr. Megan. Of course, transport and shipping are problematic. We know that. Logistics is not very helpful. And this is not new. The specs, for example, to be exported, financial facilitations. I think solutions are there and maybe are proposed long time ago. Sewedy Electric has an excellent presence in Africa. We need to study this experience. We need to mainstream that. Dr. Khaled Derbala had an excellent experience with the Embassy of Cameroon. PNG has a presence also in Africa. We are a policy-oriented center, so we will submit these recommendations to the president. Having a sovereign Egyptian fund to finance projects is worth reporting. So we will work on that, especially if we are chairing the African Union. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear him because he was not using a microphone. Yes, this is a proposal. Please provide me with like a detailed proposal. Yes, when we invest in Africa, it's a win-win situation. Africa will benefit, Egypt will benefit, and this is the integration we're after. This will solve many of the problems we face. Also, unifying the specifications might help us. And we want our African brothers and sisters to help us. And so the details of what Tawfiq said, like the Gusur or Bridges company, I will ask for details, and I will send these details to Mo Foundation, because this is like an opportunity or an investment opportunity to be built on. We will send you like a written proposal for all the experiences of the representatives, because the African countries are not well aware of all these experiences. Again, data. And the Dean of African Ambassadors said a very wise saying. It touched me. I was moved. He said that everyone is collecting statistics about Africa, but not Africa. So everyone is researching Africa, but Africa is not researching Africa. So statistics offices in Africa. So for example, in Egypt, we have CAPMAS. This is the central agency for official statistics. We can, or we stand ready to help other countries to have like a unified methodology to collect data. This is something that we can provide, and we will work on that in the Egyptian Center for Economic Studies. I hope that with the cooperation of Mo Foundation, one of the reports can cover economic activities. You have youth index, governance index, but you don't have a separate index on industry or on agriculture, because this detailed explanation will give us opportunities, because a challenge means an opportunity if properly studied. So with the availability of this data and research, we can move forward together. There is an activity tomorrow. It's not public, it's a closed meeting though, but we will study the research agendas of different think tanks all over the world, how they view development in Africa, what are the needs to be met, because some areas are over-researched, other areas are under-researched. So we will cover that tomorrow. I just wanted to tell you the areas that we're willing to help. Again, I'd like to thank everyone who participated in this session. Thank you for your precious time, whether you're a panelist or you're an attendee. I would like to thank honorable ambassadors. Again, a warm and heartfelt thank to Mo Foundation initiative. I'd like to thank my team. Please stand up. I want to thank my team. Please give them a round of applause. They are scattered all over the room, but they work really hard. Yeah, my children are naughty. They keep going through the room. I'm proud to be African. In the 3 languages, I'm proud to be African. In Arabic, in English, and French, I'm proud to be African. Thank you so much.